This interesting digital clock here is the ZULU 3TZ. One of this clock's main features is the beeping you just heard. The beeping was the 10-minute station ID timer. I just reset it with the reset button. After 10 minutes, the clock will beep gently-ish, like you heard at the start of the video. And then after one more minute, it'll beep insistently, like it just did, until you press the reset button. Pressing the reset button again will turn off the ID feature. Another feature of this clock is that it can display 2 additional time zones besides your local time, which is what I have displayed now. The local time is displayed in 12-hour format, and the 2 additional time zones are displayed in 24-hour format. So you can set them to whatever you want without messing with the setting of your main clock. Well, unless you start changing the minutes. It seems to pull the outputs periodically, which makes some of the button-controlled functionality a little annoying. You'll notice that a quick press doesn't always move the selection forward, but sometimes it does. It means you have to be ready to quickly release the button, lest you go past the setting you wanted to stop on. The same applies for the ID enable. This clock was made in 1981, so I have to cut them a little bit of slack on the software design. I don't have any kind of manual for this thing, but I believe I've been able to figure out all the features that actually work. It seems this temp button doesn't do anything at all, and there's nothing wired to that input on the board. Pressing this button here just resets the seconds to 0. So now I have to fix the setting on the clock later. I had it pretty perfectly synchronized. So there's the minutes set, hours set. It's set to time zone 3, and since I messed with the settings for the minutes and seconds, well, in this setting it'll have screwed up the settings on the main time as well. But if you just change the hours on zones 2 and 3, it won't screw with your settings here. That little dot there is the PM indication, and that's about all there is to show for features of this clock, and I'll get into the insides of it in a minute. You can see it's got 4 little rubber feet. The back is made out of printed circuit board material. I thought this was a non-original replacement, but I recently saw another one of these clocks up for sale, and it had a back made out of the same material with this kind of stylized T printed on it, and the holes were drilled in different places on that one. There's the speaker there, and here's the power jack. It runs off of 9 volts AC. I should write that on there. This switch here does absolutely nothing. It's not wired to anything at all. I'm not sure what the builder intended to hook up to this switch, but they never got around to it. I just unplugged the clock. Here's the generic adapter that I used. I've actually got a bunch of these Comptronics adapters, and I've kind of standardized most of my kit clocks to run on this type of adapter, just so they don't have different adapters for each clock. They put out 11 or 12 volts AC unloaded, and they load down to around 10, and that's enough to run most of the early digital clocks. Now let's get into the clock itself. To take it apart, you just take out these 2 screws. Could hardly be easier. With the 2 screws out, you just lift the top off, and there you go. This chip here with the heatsink is the 7805 regulator. It's a 5 volt regulator. It has had about a minute to cool off. This very pretty purple and gold chip here is the ROM. You can see it's dated 7945, so the 45th week of 1979. It was made by Moztec. Those early packages were probably expensive to produce, but they are quite nice looking. And here's the processor. It's a COP402. In the upper corner here is the crystal time base, This chip here is the MM5369, and it was designed to work with this crystal here, which is a color burst crystal designed for color televisions. My understanding is that they were a relatively inexpensive and easily available crystal that had a high precision. And this chip here allows you to use one of these crystals to generate a 60 Hz signal to drive a clock. That's a trimmer there to adjust it. Apparently it was calibrated back in 1981, and that calibration seems to still be reasonably good. I haven't messed with it. This clock does have the ability to use a backup battery, but I don't have one hooked up. You can see that switch there in the back that doesn't do anything. And this British-made speaker here. I'm not a big fan of how this AC power supply jack is just glued in place, but that glue seems to be holding up. If it breaks off, I'll replace it with a connector that has a nut on the front here to hold it in place. The clock was made by Bullet Electronics, and it says copyright 1981. I can find basically no information about this clock, and unfortunately no user manual. So if one of you guys has more information about it, I'd love to hear from you. You can see there's a hole there labeled temp, but nothing's hooked up to it. I'm not sure if that was intended to take a temperature sensor or something, but in any case, this button doesn't seem to do anything. Well, thanks for watching.